And welcome to Border Report Live. I am Daniel Marin, a reporter at KXAN in Austin. This is our weekly chat where we take a deeper dive on everything that's happening along the southern border with our team of experienced on-the-ground journalists from borderreport.com. Now, Julian and Sal are on assignment this week, but I am joined by Sandra Sanchez in the Rio Grande Valley. We also have a special guest with us this week. It's an immigration lawyer. Her name is Claudia Galan. She owns Galan Law Firms with offices in Edinburgh and San Antonio. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Claudia, first off, tell us a little bit about your background. You have a unique kind of perspective when it comes to immigration.
That's correct, Daniel. Thank you so much for having me on today. I am an immigrant myself. I was born and raised in Mexico, and at the age of 18 years old, I immigrated to the United States. Many other immigrants in looking for a better future, better opportunities, but also for safety. I am now an immigration lawyer in San Antonio, and this is where my practice is. And our primary focus is immigration law.
So talk to us right now about the process. We're going to try and stay away from the politics of all of it this week, but the process itself, when an asylum seeker arrives in the U.S., what happens first? Take us through the steps, because a lot of us don't know exactly how this works step by step.
Right. There are two ways that we're having immigrants arriving at the port of entry at the moment. One of them is they're showing up exactly at the port of entry where the line of vehicles are and claiming asylum. However, there are officers in the middle of Mexico and United States bridge where they are deterring immigrants from doing that. So the second way, which is what the majority does, is they cross through the river without inspection, sometimes with the help of coyote or somebody to guide them, or through the desert. Shortly after they cross, they are apprehended by Border Patrol officers. Then they are taken to a processing center. At that processing center, the Border Patrol agents question them about their names, country of birth, date of birth, and the reason of why they're here. If they state that they're afraid of going back to their country and they're seeking asylum, then they are supposed to be placed into a credible fear process. They are taken to an ICE detention center, where they will eventually undergo an asylum interview by an asylum officer to determine whether the reason for their fear is plausible, whether they can go forward with an asylum case. There's the standard of evidence, or the standard of proof for that is very high. Once they pass that interview, then they are able to see an immigration judge and present an asylum claim. Now, most of those people that are in detention want to be released from detention after their interviews. And at this time, because of matter of MS, a new case law by the Board of Immigration Appeals, the judges have no jurisdiction to issue a bond, and they have to be detained until the end of their case.
Let me ask you a question. We go back to when they cross, you mentioned. So they cross in between a legal port of entry, claiming asylum. I know that saying that they want to come for economic reasons is not a viable reason. That's not a credible fear reason. When they're in the processing by Customs and Border Protection, however, do you have access to them as a lawyer? Do they have the ability to make a phone call or reach out for legal assistance, or do they have to wait until they're transferred to ICE?
They have to wait until they're transferred to ICE. At the processing center, because of national security reasons, they're not allowed to make a phone call. They're not even allowed to contact their lawyers. Even if I attempt to get in touch with them, I'm not going to be allowed to be in touch with them until they're transferred to an ICE detention center.
And so how long can this take? We know the Flores Agreement says with children, they need to be processed in a specific manner. But if we're talking about adults, how long typically could they be in what's called the hilera, right?
La hilera, that is correct. Usually the process, it's in a matter of days. Usually doesn't go over 2 or 3 weeks. However, in the past, 2019, 2018, Border Patrol was holding immigrants for over 30 days without access to representation or phone call to their family members.
And Claudia, I had a question about you mentioned the high standard when it comes to the evidence. This is something that I've always wondered. What do they have to show, and what is that evidence that they have to show the U.S. officials to prove that, yes, I am under threat in my home country?
Well, really, at this stage of the credible fear interview, it's just a verbal interview. No
Okay.
evidence really is submitted. It's over the phone while they're detained. So it's very hard to submit any evidence. The standard is like maybe 10% or, 10%, as long as they show that their chances to be persecuted if they're deported back to their country is 10% or more, they should be allowed to then see an immigration judge to continue and present the evidence, testimony, and documents that they want for their asylum case.
Do they ever follow up with them? Do U.S. officials ever follow up to them to see ask for more evidence? You said, or is it just remain the verbal kind of interview?
So once they are able to see an immigration judge, the judge establishes deadlines when they have to submit their application for asylum, evidence in support, biographical documents, country conditions are always helpful, and letters of witnesses regarding their fear and why they're claiming asylum. And then after that evidence is submitted, 2 weeks after that, the hearing, the trial is held.
So if they are in detention, then at that time, it's really incumbent upon a lawyer, legal attorney. I know Transactional Records Access House, Clearinghouse of Syracuse has done many studies that have shown that those who have gotten lawyers have had more favorable case outcomes for the asylum seekers, right? A lot of that legwork fall to you as the attorney to help gather this information.
It is, especially when our clients are detained. And we've had asylum trials in detention from many different countries and from many different detention centers. It is very difficult to have access to our clients even when they're detained or when they're detained miles apart. But we are the ones who are actually in touch with their family members outside of the detention center to collect this evidence. Researching country condition articles, evidence that's going to help to support their claim, and perhaps also even hiring expert witnesses.
And when they're when they're detained, they are given an A number. That's an alien identification number, a 9-digit number. When do they get that number? When they're processed by CBP? How are they identified, or is that their number that identifies them?
That is their case number and their alien number. It's given to them at the time that they're processed. So immediately when they have the first contact with the Border Patrol officer, they're assigned an alien number and a file number that's more of an internal for them. But the alien number is what's going to help the family locate their member if it's detained. It's also what's going to help me locate their case and also where I'm going to file their evidence.
I know that as a journalist, going to immigration court is very different. Immigration courts are under the Executive Office of Immigration Review. It's not under the Justice Department, right? And I have to look up and know the A number for the person that I'm going to attend to see. And many times I've been called out by a judge in court. Who are you? Why are you here? What's the A number? Do you have permission? You can't just go in with the name of someone and want to see court, right? It's very specific. It's very different, set up very different.
That is correct. And given the type of cases and the claims are very sensitive information that's discussed during master hearings and individual proceedings, asylum hearings are closed proceedings, meaning that only the respondent, their lawyer, the government, and any witnesses are allowed to be there. Outside people have to be there with the permission of the respondent and the judge as well.
We've got to take our first break here. We'll come back and talk about how the courts have been changing. Stick with us. This week, we're talking with immigration lawyer Claudia Galan. Claudia, the immigration courts themselves, how different are they from, say, maybe 2019?
Well, in 2019, Trump was still president. So while there is some change, there's still not a lot of change. We're seeing more of a bigger backlog. However, we're seeing also cases being expedited, maybe cases that are for recent entries. But the very main difference now, Daniel, is that cases that were administratively closed, these were cases that were temporarily closed, so the respondent can perhaps seek consular process or a waiver or perhaps a family petition outside of court. Those cases are now being reopened, and all of those people are going to have to go back to court. Also, during the Biden administration, we had a lot of cases dismissed without prejudice, just because the government wasn't interested in deporting those people, and they were low risk, low priority. So those cases, some of them we've been seeing that they're being refiled in court, which means that they have to go back to another court hearing. So what we're seeing now is really that the courts are going to be flooded. And unfortunately, we were going to have many judges added to the Department of Justice this year who were fired and were not even hired. And that's going to be a cost a bigger burden.
Yeah, there's 3.7 million backlog cases.
Right.
There's fewer than 700 federal immigration judges, right? What is that? 51,000 cases a person, something like that. I mean, they're in a world of hurt for the need to hire more judges, right? I know Congress has approved the money. They just don't seem to fill the seats.
And it's been like that for years.
That is correct. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of expansion of courts. Recently, we had the Laredo, Texas court open in the last 4 years, and the cases seem to go faster there because it's a new court. However, the need of more judges is still very important. And this is going to cause a lot of burnout to the judges perhaps not really looking at the cases carefully, especially when the respondent is appearing pro se. And without a lawyer, it's very important that the judge still informs the respondent of their rights and their relief that they can qualify for.
You were saying that the cases go faster in the newer court. Why is that?
Because they have less cases assigned to that court. The courts are usually handling cases that belong to their jurisdiction, meaning people that live in that area.
Got it. Okay.
The files you mentioned, I know you had told me there's more digitalization of the cases now, right? Less face-to-face, less in-person. I mean, on the one hand, you could see that might be an more efficient use of time, less hearings scheduled. On the other hand, what does it do as far as you as a lawyer representing your client, talking to people in person? How does that affect case outcomes?
Well, here as a lawyer, now that the process is changing from paper filing and sending everything through mail to now being through email or through a portal, we have to be more cautious in checking our email, making sure that none of the notices that are sent through email to us are missed, because most of those notices come with deadlines to file applications, documents of relief. And if those deadlines are missed, then the respondent can be order removed. Now, yes, we're also seeing a lot of hearings being handled via WebEx, which is a platform similar like Zoom. Respondents that are perhaps away for work and they're not locally and they want to appear via WebEx. If they're not able to appear on time or they have technical difficulties and they do not appear, then they will be order removed in absentia. And these are situations that are very, we have to be careful. We have to be cautious in responding or advising to our clients. My preference is to go in person or have the client come to my office so we can appear via WebEx.
And the clients themselves, when their first appearance, I have been to some of this was in the height of immigrants coming across, say, in the Brownsville area. Huge tent facilities were built for these mobile courts. And, I would see 100 people in one room, and it was all by video. Is that still the case that's happening for the clients?
In some courts, it is. The courts that you're referring to are the migrant protection protocols back in 2019. We represented people there at those 10 courts along the border in Brownsville and Laredo, Texas. However, there are some judges out of Harlingen courts that are set in Harlingen where the judge appears via WebEx. There is adjudication center in Fort Worth, Texas, where there is maybe close to 16, 19 judges hearing cases from many different states throughout the country where the respondent is appearing via WebEx. I've had some of those hearings.
And President Trump has vowed to restart MPP, migrant protection protocols. Right now, the asylum regulation is really not allowing people to come in. That's kind of stopping that, but he has started that again. I know the structures are still existing, so it's very possible they could open this court system again.
That is correct. I do believe that that's what we're going to see in the near future, that we're going to have to represent people at the border. And this creates a huge risk for people at the border, given that they're vulnerable to cartels and kidnappings and other similar crimes.
We want to pivot to the president recently invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport a group of Venezuelans to El Salvador. The claim is that they are members of the Tren de Aragua, a gang, although not a whole lot of evidence to back that up. I do want to point out, though, that U.S. officials in a court filing earlier this week, they said that while a lot of these individuals do not have criminal records in the U.S., they are suspected gang members. One of the quotes here is that the lack of a criminal record does not indicate that that they pose a limited threat. They said the lack of specific information about each individual actually highlights the risk that they pose. So that is what's coming from the White House right now. Claudia, our question to you is, how does this affect, I guess, due process when it comes to these clients, to these people?
This is essentially becoming a situation where the executive branch, if allowed to continue with this kind of behavior, will essentially be able to deport anybody who's in the middle of an asylum case. Some of those people that were deported had a trial date set in the future. They had a master hearing set in the future. They had their asylum casing process pending. And however, just under the suspicion, whether because it was social media posts or because it was a tattoo, they were labeled as members of this criminal organization and deported to El Salvador. In fact, El Salvador recognizes that about 20% of those people are not affiliated to these criminal organizations. And I am pretty sure that we deported some people that were not affiliated to the gangs.
Kelly Stump is president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and she said, quote, "This is an extraordinary overreach of the president's authority." But Tom Homan, the president's border czar, told our News Nation just yesterday that they will continue to arrest the bad guys, the worst of the worst, and continue to put and continue to deport people who are suspected of TDA. And he says they have great leeway when it involves people that are suspected of being in Tren de Aragua. And he says we can hold them for 6 months on various charges without even having to have them released for other reasons, or they're. He basically said that they have more leeway with that, and that is what the administration intends to do.
Right. The problem here is that the Alien Enemies Act that they're invoking gives them essentially this power. However, this act has not invoked in the past, and is usually invoked at times of war. We're not at times of war with Venezuela at the moment, and the people that are being targeted are from that country. Essentially here, what we're seeing is a situation, a recipe for the disaster where legal scholars, lawyers like me are concerned that people's constitutional rights are going to be trumped over and they're not going to have a day in court, essentially.
And just to follow up on that, I do want to say that Homan also told News Nation that he intends to let this play out in the court system. And that is the basis for our democracy, right? The courts have always been the ultimate checks and balance. And so ultimately, the judicial system, I think that a lot of the upcoming questions about immigration are really going to be decided in the judicial system, right, Claudia?
That is correct here. There's even attempts from Trump's administration to have the judge here in this case recuse himself. So they're really challenging the judicial branch and the authority of the court. And right now, as of Saturday, they haven't returned the planes. There was a court order issue, a final court order issue in writing. And despite that order being issued, one last plane still took off.
Claudia, what do you say to those who say, the bottom line, though, are these people who are being deported, they were here illegally, so deportation, how do you respond to that?
Well, that is correct. We have to recognize that we have a constitution and we have due process and we have a system. And when you are attacking that procedure, when you're attacking the rights of these people that are vulnerable, then you create a space and a window of opportunity for other people's, other minorities' rights to be also harmed and trumped. So in this situation, we want to make sure that the rule of law is still being followed by the executive branch and by the judicial branch as well. And we have these checks and balances. So when we have this threat of one branch not following the rules from another one, then that is a recipe for disaster. And we can see, obviously, the fall of a country, unfortunately.
And we'll see how this plays out in the courts. We have to take another break. We will be right back. And welcome back to Border Report Live, joined by immigration lawyer Claudia Galan this week. Claudia, talk to us about the 2019 case of Francisco Galicia. Tell us about that case. It's a big case for you.
Right, absolutely. That was at the very start of my career. 18-year-old Francisco Galicia, U.S. citizen, was detained at the checkpoint along with his brother and other friends while they were going to a university to a scouting event for sports. And at this point, he presented his birth certificate, the short form. He also presented his Texas ID and his social security card. However, he was racial profiled by Border Patrol agents, didn't believe that he was a U.S. citizen because he has a very strong accent. And he was detained for 28 days without having an opportunity to call his mom or without me having access to him.
Sandra, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, I mean, you got notoriety for this case. You were quoted in the Washington Post. I understand that there was some confusion about his birth certificate to prove the citizenship, that his mother had used it to file a visa before and said he had been a Mexican, born in Mexico, and that kind of added to the confusion.
That is correct. Initially, that's what officers believed, that his U.S. Documents were fake, perhaps, and he was even charged with a false claim to U.S. citizenship. He had a tourist visa that was filed when he was a child by his Mexican mother, and that's what created confusion. However, whenever there is a claim to a U.S. citizenship, the officers have a duty to investigate and make sure that whether that is false or true. The birth certificate was registered in Dallas, Texas, and with the state of Texas. The birth certificate also stated that he was born at a hospital and he had a driver's license and also social security. If they had investigated that matter, then he would not have been detained for close to a month.
We recently actually did a show on those who apply for green cards and rules that they have to follow. One of them is making sure that all the documents that you submit, that all the records, all the information, that there are no errors, just a slip up in a birthday, a misstatement on an employment application could really potentially cause some serious outcomes immigration-wise.
Well, here, when you're talking about misinformation or false information, we want to make sure that it's not material information. When an applicant or immigrant is not disclosing material information will be information that is necessary to approve or deny your benefit. So in this case, yes, we want to make sure that everything matches dates, employment dates. However, material information is the most important thing. But in this case, Sandra, he is a U.S. citizen. That should have been taken into account, whether he had a tourist visa or not. Obviously, that tourist visa was issued in error. And what really matters is his U.S. birth certificate.
We are
I
running
know
out
that
of,
we don't have a lot of time. I'm
yeah.
kind of curious, how long do your cases last? How long does it take to represent clients?
It depends. I've recently had a case where my client had been in proceedings for 10 years. I was his fourth lawyer, and we were successfully obtained a win in that case, and he was able to remain here in his family. But other cases can resolve in less than a year. I also just had a case that was approved cancellation of removal for a client, and that took 9 months in Laredo, Texas.
Immigration lawyer Claudia Galan, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Sandra, thanks for being here. Check out Sandra's reporting on borderreport.com. I'm Daniel Marin. This has been another edition of Border Report Live. We will see you next week. Thanks for being here.